I'm Forrest Lauderhaus. Y'all who don't know me, he, they pronouns. I'm the internship program lead at EFTA. I coordinated the Let's Go Birding program this summer along with Stephanie Laredo, our senior manager of internship programs. Thanks for being here today. Uh, Excited to see everybody and get to introduce our interns. I'm not seeing Kat on here yet. I was gonna shout out to Kat. Hopefully she'll join soon, but I just want to say thank you to our program partners, Kat Fridley at Birdability and Katie Campbell at MPS, as well as the MPS site supervisors and staff that work directly with our interns. It's been an honor to work with all of you this summer. I also want to say thanks to our EFTA staff who've been supporting behind the scenes and our internship team. Really grateful to the Let's Go Birding interns, and I've been super impressed by this year's cohort. I've learned a lot from you guys this summer. I'm excited to continue to learn from your experiences and contributions to this field of conservation. Um, as a neurodivergent, disabled individual myself, this work means a lot. It just means a lot to me personally and to the communities that I'm in. The foundation of this work is understanding that when we focus on designing programs and events with disability access at the forefront, we actually improve access and inclusion for all people to enjoy wild spaces and benefit from nature and birding. This year's cohort, we had 6 interns at 4 different national park sites, designing and leading birding programs. A.G. Ergatad and Vince Pearson worked at Medgar and Merle Eversholm National Monument in Jackson, Mississippi. Zachary Benz and Amanda Chanter worked at Cuyahoga Valley National Park in Ohio. Lily Zavarella worked at Colorado National Monument on the Western Slope. And Aiden Brown worked at Rocky Mountain National Park on the west side near Grand Lake, Colorado. So for the presentation, each site will present the work that they did this summer. We'll have a slideshow. They'll talk about some of the challenges they faced and how they overcame those challenges, as well as some recommendations for each site to think about ways to improve accessibility for future visitors, events, and birding programs. After the presentation, we'll have a few minutes, after each presentation, we'll just have a few minutes for a brief Q&A. If you'd like to ask a question, you can use the raise hand button. It's under React on your Zoom. And Stephanie Laredo will call on you at that time. You can either ask your question aloud or type it in the chat, and Stephanie will read it aloud for you. We'll have a brief 5-minute bio break at the halfway mark. And then at the end of the presentations, we will give out some kudos to our interns and some of our partners, Kat and Katie, and potentially Susan is going to say a few words. So thank you all again for being here and supporting this work and this amazing cohort. So I'm going to start the slide deck and we will have Amanda and Zach up first. All right, Zach and Amanda, take it away, y'all.
Alrighty. Hi everyone. My name's Amanda. I use she,
And
her
my name is
pronouns.
Zach, and I use he, him. Sorry.
And we were the interns at the Cuyahoga Valley National Park this summer.
For a little bit of background about the park, Cuyahoga Valley is a 51.2 square mile national park. It's located between Cleveland and Akron, Ohio. The park consists mainly of deciduous forest, wetland, and river habitats, mainly due to the Cuyahoga River, which is also the namesake of the park. The Cuyahoga River runs through the entire park and it feeds down from Lake Erie. Something that you may have possibly heard in relation to this river is the famous river fires. This is very important for the history of this park as the river fires and the subsequent restoration that happened because of the national park and all of the efforts that they put into conservation is a really big like part of why this is such a important national park to have in our country. And there's also 250 bird species, and it's a designated migration hotspot, partially due to the fact that it is surrounded by so much urban area. And it is also one of the most accessible national parks because there is 100 plus miles of paved trail. Next slide. All right, and then for a little bit more background about like the stuff that we were actually doing, we held programs at a couple different places in the park. The Boston Store, the Canal Exploration Center, which that one's probably the furthest from where we were mainly stationed at the Environmental Education Center. It's a little closer to Cleveland, and then Hunt Farm. And some of the disability communities that we engaged with were blind and low vision people, people with Down syndrome, and those with autism, although we had several other disability communities represented in some of our programs. Those were just the main ones that we like specifically targeted, or the organizations that we worked with were specifically like for that specific disability group.
To get a general overview of all the events we did, we partnered mainly with three organizations, well, two organizations and one person, Gigi's Playhouse Cleveland, Rec Connect, and Kathy Flesher, who is a local birder. We had 15 total events, 9 Let's Go Birding programs, 2 crograms, and 6 sites mapped on the birdability map. Next slide, please. Thank you.
You guys are never
Uh,
going to guess who came up with this one.
So our first program that we ran was our program. This was kind of a general public kind of situation. We're casting that wide net, but it's accessible to everybody. Uh, we had a big draw in with our quiz. I mean, if you see a poster board that says test your bird brain, I think you'd want to test your bird brain. Uh, and it was alongside the towpath, which is that 100 plus mile of paved trail. That's the towpath here. So it was along there, so it drew in a lot of traffic, a lot of curiosity, and it was kind of the program that helped us find our footing. We hadn't done this before. This was our program that like we started, we developed ourselves, we got out there, we tabled, and we're like, okay, I think we can manage this. I think we're finding ourselves, our rhythm.
Yeah, and if you guys can see the green on the table that I'm pointing to in that middle picture, there was also some crow and raven identification flashcards that I made.
Next up, we've got our Boston Store program. Again, this is a more general public, wide net kind of situation. This is what we called our Let's Go Birding program because, I mean, it's a really catchy title. We liked it a lot. Uh, this is where we got a bulk of our visitor interactions, 181 and counting. We have another one tomorrow. Uh, this was in an accessible area. It's right near the visitor center, so there's a lot of traffic. It's nearby to the towpath. It's on a well-paved surface, and it's surrounded by a lot of seats and some shade. Our main focus at our table was obviously the bird walks, but while we were waiting for the next time to pop up, we had our bird nesting game where we're matching the birds in the park to the kind of bird that lives or the kind of nest they make. We had the bird masks, we had the EFTA birds that we turned into paper airplanes, and we had window clings. And then we had a running list of the birds that we had noticed well outside that day.
Yeah, and sirs, the bird walks we also did there's this green heron nest that's down relatively close to the site, and so we got to see the nesting pair of green herons several times. You can
Thank you, Forrest. Our next interaction was with Kathy Flesher. She is a birder who is blind who lives in the area, who reached out via Birdability because she had heard on the blog that there were 2 interns at the national park near her house. She wanted to reach out to us, interact with us, go birding with us, and of course, we jumped on that possibility. We birded at her with a park or at a park near her house, one she'd never been to before. And we were taught by her how to guide someone who is blind, and really just got to be in awe of her sound ID skills. She is a great birder.
We also got to talk to her a little bit about some of the barriers that she faced, which the big one is transportation, hence why she'd never been to that park.
Our next program was with Gigi's Playhouse. They're a global organization with playhouses internationally. These playhouses are Down syndrome achievement centers that help build up people with Down syndrome and give them the tools to thrive. This program was kind of my baby. I volunteered with Gigi's for a number of years. It's just a great organization and great people. And as soon as I got this internship, I thought I want to make a connection with Gigi's. Uh, so with our program, we focused on some sight and sound ID practice. We did a short bird walk, and we'll talk about this site later. Uh, but it was along a gravel path, many frequent benches. It was shaded, and there were a lot of great birds. We were able to get the accessibility alongside the species diversity. After the bird walk, we colored some window clings and discussed bird strikes and how window clings and stickers on the window can prevent that. Uh, we had three total dates for this event. The first one we canceled due to the poor air quality from the wildfire smoke. We still managed to get four people to show up despite that cancellation, and so we rushed up there to get an impromptu indoor birding. The second one, we didn't have any attendance, but the third, we had 11 participants, and it was just a wonderful morning out learning about birds, teaching about birds. It was just really something special. One of the participants mentioned to me that she had been excited all week. She bought a bird guide for this. She brought her own binoculars, and every time we were doing sound or sight ID, she would flip through her book, hold up the picture, and it was always the right bird. And seeing people so excited for what we were doing just made me feel really good.
The last one that we connected with, specifically this last specific organization that we're going to talk about is Rec to Connect. They are a organization based in Independence, which is about 20 minutes from the park, focused on doing recreation therapy for those with disabilities. Some of the things that we did on our hike with them were we had a bird bingo that Amanda made that we printed out and gave to participants. That was a really big hit. It helped people get engaged with their surroundings, and it also was vague enough that everybody was given a fair chance to actually get a bingo. And then we also did some sound ID. We talked about the different habitats around us that the birds lived in, and we shared birdability resources because a lot of these folks are this was the hiking club specifically, and they were wondering if we knew of any other accessible trails nearby.
To go over all the materials that we produce for our programs. We had the programs themselves, the GG's program, and then also a program for Cleveland Site Center that ended up falling through due to scheduling conflicts. We produced uh, a digital poster for the GG's event, that nest matching game, which you can see in the lower corner. It's models of different nests and photos of birds that live in the park, and you've got to match which bird lives where. I think it was a great interactive feature. It draws people in and it teaches them about birds living in the park and things they could see. They were not as sturdy as I would have liked. That log lasted about half an hour before someone broke it in half, and the kingfisher burrow did get a little broken, but we live and we learn. We also produced a guide to help teach people how to guide people who are blind, and how to bird with them specifically, because the park does a lot of connections with the Cleveland Site Center. So we wanted to make sure we had a quick little intro for anyone interested in helping out there.
We also had our posters and yes, you can see, you guys already saw the program one. This was just another one that I made for our Let's Go Birding program. Same idea, you just flip up the flaps and there's fun facts underneath. Also Ranger Bird. I had nothing to say, he's just important. For our first accessibility analysis, we picked the Beaver Marsh. This is a location in the park. For a little bit of background, it was originally going to be a parking lot until beavers moved in and made a dam, and they came back one day and it was covered in water. And instead of trying to fight that, they just said, okay, I guess the beavers have this now. And it is now one of the most popular areas in the park. It's a really beautiful marsh area with a ton of bird life. You're almost guaranteed to see a great blue heron at some point. I don't think I've ever been there without seeing one. It's part of the towpath, which means that it's paved, and it's also a really good accessible programming site because of the boardwalk. There's a visible railing like that you can actually see through even if you're not able to see above it, and lots of tactile exhibits, which makes it blind and low vision friendly. The only problem is really just that it's kind of hot, and sometimes there's cyclists that aren't super clear about being behind you.
The other site that we wanted to focus on for our accessibility analysis was the Canal Exploration Center. Again, it's part of the towpath. It's hard to miss 100 miles of accessible trail. Uh, this path has frequent benches, plenty of shade, and is made of well-crushed gravel. There's no noticeable slope changes, so people on wheels are free to roll on by. There's also nearby accessible facilities. There's always accessible bathrooms and water available. And then Wednesday through Sunday, there are more restrooms available, air conditioning, and then the rest of the Canal Exploration Center, which is just a great site in general in terms of accessibility. This was a site great for bird outings. We did our GG's program here due to all these accessible facilities. And like I said earlier, there's a lot of species diversity. We even saw a bald eagle at one of our times down at the CEC. Now for some challenges. Uh, I think our biggest challenge was scheduling an outreach. We sent a heck of a lot of emails. I'm sure everyone has in this program, but we did so much contacting, reaching out to way more organizations than we expected to reply, but people were already scheduled out for the summer. So we did what we could, but a lot of people wanted to, but their summers were already scheduled.
Yeah, we also had quite a bit of inclement weather. As previously mentioned, the Canadian wildfire smoke was a interesting experience. Outside was just kind of ominous smog for a little bit. So that was obviously not great. We didn't want to poison participants. And then we also had quite a bit of rain where we had to move programs inside, but we did a pretty decent job of accommodating. We also had there was some character limits on like the listings on the website, which meant that communicating accessibility fully was a bit tough, but we just left our contact info. Also, the computers hate us because for the first month, Amanda did not have a working computer, and for the second month, I still don't have a working computer.
Another challenge that I specifically faced was putting on the Ranger performance. Uh, I call it this because as I'm wearing the arrowhead, I'm looked to as a person in charge, and who knows things about the park. And a lot of the times I had no clue. There was many a time someone came up asking where a trail was, and I was like, that's a really great question. I stuck to a lot of the I don't know, but I know where we can find out line. And as a result, I learned a lot more about the park, but I still felt a little off my footing. I think that's something, though, that would just come with experience and being that person people are connecting with.
She did great, guys. It was noticeable. I had a little bit of trouble learning to work with young kids just because I'm a little less like I'm not as comfortable. Amanda has several siblings. I only have one, and I was 4 whenever she was born, so I don't really remember being older. But with time and practice, it got a lot better, and I feel a lot more comfortable with it now.
And now, some recommendations for accessibility. This is a great park for accessibility, but there's always places where people can improve. Uh, I think just putting more information on the website is something that is a very easy first step. I want it to be easy for people with disabilities to see what they need to see when they're trying to research a site. Don't make it a fight before they arrive. Have everything like trail conditions, length, surface, amenities, anything that they might find useful, have it on there, including like things that the park can offer, like all-terrain wheelchairs or I'm sorry, I forgot the word. Translating devices, things like that the park has at its services. Get that information out there.
And then, of course, keeping up with outreach after we're gone. We had a lot of organizations, like Amanda said earlier, that just wanted really badly to join the park and do stuff at the park, but just couldn't at the time that we were doing our internship. I have no doubts that our supervisor and everybody that's working there will continue with this, but it's just something that we wanted to highlight. And then also, ask people how to make things accessible to them. If they're worried that they may not be able to accommodate a specific group, just ask them. They are the ones that know how to make it accessible best.
People with disabilities tend to know that they have disabilities, and so it's not anything to be scared of to ask them what accommodations might help. Then just some final thoughts. Who'd have thunk it, but increasing accessibility is actually pretty accessible. I mean, just going on a hike, if you grab a tape measure and have some patience, you're able to make a hike into a birdability site review, which helps so many more people. And that's you making a difference as one person for so many more.
And then working in the park is definitely like the ultimate customer service job. I used to work retail. That's not really a customer service as much as it is being an emotional punching bag. But this is very different. People actually want to engage with you, and interpretation, especially, is a really cool skill that I got to learn because, like, it engaging them in what they want to learn in kind of going with what the visitor is interested in.
And when you engage someone, you are connecting them to the park. You are showing them that the park is for them. And I think that's really powerful, like being that gateway to getting someone to care about the environment. And then we just have a slide of general thanks, not only to all the organizations that made this possible, this internship, Birdability, National Park Service, and Environment for the Americas, but I also wanted to extend that thank you to the Conservancy staff here. Everyone at this park has just been absolutely amazing. They have made us feel so welcome, so a part of the team, and like we are making a difference. And it's really made us feel so welcome. And this internship has just been an amazing opportunity and very powerful. So I wanted to say thank you to everyone, especially our supervisor. Heather has been the best. She has been so much more than accommodating, so supportive, and just the best supervisor anyone could ask for.
Bravo. Thank you, Zach and Amanda. First, do we have time for questions?
Yeah, we have a few minutes.
Okay. If anyone has any questions, feel free to unmute, raise your hand, or write it in the chat. I don't see any questions in the chat yet, but just a lot of congratulatory comments. All right, here's one. What is your favorite bird that you found at the site?
Probably green heron.
Green heron.
There was a lot of those, and they're my favorite heron, and they're really goofy looking, and I like them.
Yeah, nice one.
That's really tough. We got to see a lot of cool birds. I think I'm gonna say the indigo bunting because I got to see them a lot more than I ever have. I've only ever heard them. And so getting to like see them during the bird banding, getting to see like a female just so beautiful, that was definitely a peak for me.
Awesome. Yes, those are really cool birds. And we have a question from the audience. Go ahead, Lily.
Was there any visitor interaction, like particular individual visitor that's gonna stick with you?
I think for me, it's gonna be the one participant that was at our Gigi's program, who had been waiting all week. We were nervous after our second one when no one attended that we hadn't done a good job communicating that not all the programs were canceled, just the one that was on the day with the poor air quality. So we were really nervous going up to that final one and having someone go like, "Oh my goodness, I've been waiting all week. This has been like the highlight. I won't like." Her family members were saying like she hasn't stopped talking about it. She's just been really hyped. I think that's gonna stick with me for a while, like making that opportunity for her.
That's awesome.
It's kind of tough. I'm not entirely certain, but I definitely think I'm gonna remember. Like, I'll pick two. They're both kind of funny. The first one is this kid that had a 6'7" shirt on that would not accept my sidestepping of him asking if I liked 6'7" because the answer is no. Um, but I was like, I'm not gonna tell this kid that, and he would not let me not answer that question. He needed to know if I liked 6'7". It was very funny. And then the other one is there was this couple from Florida that came down and came up to the park, and they were just so excited to go on the bird walk with me. The lady was like just going on and on. She's like, "I love birds. I'm so excited that you guys have a birding thing. Like, I'm really like, I wonder what birds you guys have here." Just really into it, and we got to see an indigo bunting singing and of course, both green herons on that walk, which was really exciting.
That's really cool. Thanks for sharing.
Yes, thanks for sharing, guys. I will. Do we have another question? Or
I saw Vince in the chat.
Oh
I
yeah.
don't know how many new lifers because I've been notoriously terrible about keeping a life list. But I did learn how to use eBird thanks to Claudia's encouragement. And now I'm able to keep one reliably. So I'm, oh, I saw a yellow-billed cuckoo. That was cool. And I know I'd never seen that one before.
Yay
I
for
also
learning to
saw a
use
great
it.
crested flycatcher, which is like I know that's not that exciting, but I hadn't seen one before, so.
Oh, that's super cool. Love that. All right, I think we're ready for the next group. Thank you again, Zach and Amanda.
all right, AG and Vince, you're up next.
All right. Hello, I'm Vince, he, him pronouns.
Hi, I'm AG, they them pronouns.
All right. So, why Let's Go Birding? I applied because I have some my own experience with disability, both physical and non-physical, and I've always wanted to go outside and do any type of outdoors work, mostly around education. And so this program was a great fit for me. I expected a lot of hard paperwork and planning tasks, and having to figure out how to get a lot of things changed. Um, and I was really excited for teaching people in my community about birding. I have volunteered a couple of times at the site beforehand, and I had done some stuff with like my garden club with that, but I didn't really have other connections besides that. I was mostly just really excited to get birding into the community that I've been living in for 4 years and make sure that that's more accessible for people.
For me, I applied to Let's Go Boating because I got most seriously into boating about a year ago when I started college, although I've always been interested in it. Um, it fit with a lot of what I was interested in, as well as that I have some issues with chronic illness and chronic pain, and I had some accessibility struggles with the boat club at my college. So it made me want to help improve the experience for other people when they start boating. As well as I was most excited to get more experience in the realm of conservation and learn about the different jobs in the field of environment and conservation, as well as getting to introduce people to boating and share my passion.
We can go to the next slide, please. All right. So our site is a little bit different than the average national park site as we are a historical monument. So we focus on cultural resources and history preservation work generally at the monument. And so we were the only environmental interpretation staff at the park. And we just had the actual site being the house and the garden. So it's a pretty small site in general.
So a little more about the site is that This is the Medgar and Lily Evers Home National Monument. Mr. Medgar Evers was a prominent civil rights activist who established the NAACP office in Jackson, Mississippi, where his wife Lily worked closely alongside him. Some of the things he did include organizing boycotts and voter registration drives, leading demonstrations, helping form alliances with other civil rights groups in the area, and investigating cases of anti-Black violence and discrimination. In 1963, he was shot and killed by a white supremacist in his own driveway. And Miss Morley's activism after his assassination helped bolster public support for the Civil Rights Movement and the Civil Rights Act. The site itself consists of the family home along with Morley's garden. So in the home, this was the home where the Evers raised their 3 children and did everything a typical family of the time did. But it was also an extension of the NAACP office where they continued their work along with using their house to host civil rights activists and African Americans threatened by white supremacist violence. And then Morley's Garden is a community garden that the park established due to Miss Morley's love for gardening. So Miss Morley established her own garden club because Black women were not allowed to join most garden clubs in the Jackson area. And then the connection to nature and learning with this historical site is that the family enjoyed outdoor recreation together, and it brought peace and calm to an otherwise stressful and high-pressure life, as well as that communities connected to nature are also often more connected to each other, and strong community networks were essential for what the Evers family did day to day, along with their activism. We're good for that, yeah. So when working with boatability sites in Jackson and the Jackson area, one struggle was finding accessible and well-maintained trails in the city of Jackson. Almost everywhere that we chose for a boatability site to investigate was in the suburbs, just because of how the city is laid out. So for each site, we took a measuring tape on a clipboard to measure different accessibility metrics, such as the trail width and the presence of benches. And then we sorted our locations into 3 categories, being needing significant improvement, moderately accessible areas, and the most accessible areas, although no areas were generally accessible to a large variety of needs. Typically, areas focused on physical or wheelchair accessibility only, or the one site that we had that had different accessibility features was not completely physically accessible.
For our trails that needed significant improvement, the ones we put on birdability were Clinton Community Center, Nature Center trails, Simmons, Arboretum Loop, and the Cypress Swamp Trail. The Clinton Community Nature Center trails and the Cypress Swamp trails both had a lot of stairs, and the Cypress Swamp Trail, the stairs were unavoidable. And for those as well, there were issues with the trails being smaller when the ground cover changed, and so if it went from paved into crushed gravel, the trail would be a lot smaller most of the time. And in general, these trails were not super well maintained. As you can see in the Arboretum Loop, there's a tree that had fallen over and that didn't look particularly new. There weren't very many benches. If there were benches, they were like the one I'm sitting on in that slide, not very usable benches, and there weren't really accessible restrooms, nor were there accessible water fountains. A lot of them didn't even really have water fountains there. We did also go to some more sites, such as Laurel Street Park and Pelahatchie Shore Park. We didn't add these to birdability just because they lacked such physical accessibility. But we will still be putting them onto the map. They just were that needing of improvement.
So for moderately accessible areas, the main 3 moderately accessible areas were the LaFleur Park connector section of the Museum Trail, the Reservoir Botanical Gardens, and Liberty Park. So for all of these trails were decently wheelchair accessible, having relatively flat, wide, and paved trails. In the museum trail, one main issue is that there weren't any benches in the area, which limited the physical accessibility. It was relatively quiet and had low sensory input, so it could be a good option for bird outings with large groups, including groups of wheelchair users or neurodivergent individuals. For the Reservoir Botanical Gardens, this site was the one site we visited that had accessibility features specifically for people who are blind or have low vision, with braille on signage, along with texture strips that had spots to access, that indicated spots to access audio tool information for the nature interpretation. The main issue with it is that there was poor trail maintenance that decreased wheelchair accessibility because there were large cracks in the trail and sometimes they had vegetation growing through them. So it would be a good choice for groups that had people who were blind or low vision, but the physical accessibility was mediocre. And then for Liberty Park, it was fairly physically accessible because it was flat and had benches, but the severe lack of shade presents potential difficulties for individuals with health conditions, especially with all the heat advisories we had in Mississippi. Both interns struggled with heat exhaustion when visiting this location, so that was just another thing to consider. And then for our most accessible areas, we have Flowood Nature Park, Morley's Garden, and Turtle Point Park. All of these had wide and paved paths that were relatively flat, and they all had benches, as well as plenty of shade. Flowood Nature Park was particularly good because we saw so much species diversity, likely because it was a large park area that also had a lake, so we were able to see some water birds as well. And then, so this would be good for bird walks, possibly a neurodivergent audience because of the low sensory input, and any groups with physical access needs. For Morley's Garden, this is a place where mostly stationary birding activities would be preferable because there's not a long trail and path for like a hike or a bird outing, but it has a lot of seating and lots of shade and some really nice paths. So it would be good for stationary birding events, and we did help hold accessible stationary birding events each week there. And then for Turtle Point Park, that was just another area that had good physical accessibility because it was flat, had benches, and it also had low sensory input, so it could be good for people with neurodivergence.
Our birding metrics. So we had a total of 1,466 sightings across 69 different species. We averaged 36 birds belonging to 12 different species per outing over our 42 outings. And we spent an average of 63 minutes out walking, an average of 0.27 miles per outing. And so these are just some graphs that I had made to kind of show people that you don't really need to walk to bird. We did a lot of stationary birding and we saw a lot of species stationary birding, really just to show that the amount of time you spend out there is what really counts. All right. Next slide, please. All right. And mostly our events were obviously centered on wildlife education. We worked with both kids and adults, both abled and disabled. And we mostly just had to figure out what people needed to learn and building interest from nature based off of another subject, agriculture, social justice, biology, history, communicating the importance of conservation and birding just in general while making sure that people have their individual connections to it and feel like they have that connection ready for them.
So for our events, we held 11 events total, including 6 weekly Morley's Garden boating events, which we had 7 people total at all of those combined. And then we had several partnerships with some nonprofits we're going to talk about a little bit later. So we had an event with Operation Shoestring, which we served 25 people in that event. We had a partnership with the Mustard Seed, in which we served 16 participants. An event with the Wolf Studio that served 18 people. And then we had our World Migratory Bird Day celebration at the Mississippi Museum of Natural Science, and that event had 116 people, which gives us a total of 176 visitors served across all of our events.
So the first partnership event we did was with Operation Shoestring. Operation Shoestring is a nonprofit in Jackson that focuses on engaging and uplifting Black youth and their families. We worked with them to have a 2-day program with students aged 3rd to 5th grade. First, we had it at the house. You can see, and 3 of the pictures were in Murley's garden, and we used their connections to history of the site to get them engaged in talking about the environment and birding, primarily through connecting Black history and Black culture to birding and to the environment. And on the second day, we took them on a trail walk using that museum trail, and we did this after having a little activity of teaching everyone how to use field guides and their binoculars again. And so, next slide, please. Thank you. So some of the things we did is we weren't able, unfortunately, to use our sorry. Our bird coloring sheet, because there were a couple complications within the group, but I did end up making a zine about connecting birds and wildlife to the Underground Railroad and how people escaped enslavement using birds specifically, and gave those out to all the kids.
And then we also had a bird bingo for this event that I made. That was really popular with the kids because it was an easy way to keep everyone engaged during a birding activity. So next we also had a group from Alcorn State University, the Sustainable Agricultural Interns, and we connected agriculture to birding through Murley's Garden, and we talked about how certain birds are pollinators and provide natural pest control for crops. We talked about how it's important to plant natives and also how supporting native bugs helps bird populations. Then we did some birding in the garden as well.
And then we have our Murley's Garden birding. Oh, never mind. Sorry, I was on the wrong slide, Doc. Apologies for that. Wolf Studio, we had a meditation event, and so this was to kind of just show people how to, instead of taking a meditation class and having a specific place to meditate, that you can do it anywhere. You don't need an audio. If your phone's broken, if you're out somewhere, you always have the birds around you. And so you don't need to have a specific spot to ground yourself and to increase your mindfulness. You have the birds everywhere all of the time. We started this event with a presentation that AG gave about birding and mental health. And then we played a 20-minute meditation audio that I made, which just had a bunch of bird sounds that were common in the area, especially common with the bird feeders setup that we had over there. And then we went out and we birded for a while. We had some binoculars for some visual birding, but we really encourage people to do some auditory birding and birding by sound. And we had a lot of really good conversations about mindfulness and people's experience with birding.
And then so for our next event with Mustard Seed, the Mustard Seed is a group home for adults with intellectual disabilities. And we held a choose your own adventure style birding event where participants could choose between stationary and traveling activities. So for stationary activities, we had stationary birding as well as a craft activity, which was we had the bird coloring sheet and we had some cutouts that our participants could color to make whatever bird that they would like. And then we had all stationary and traveling birdings as options. The birding went really well. There were lots of different species. While I was inside crafting the birding group with Vince saw a pine warbler, which none of us had seen all season, so that was awesome. And in general, there was a lot of engagement, and everyone was interested in learning about the birds and getting to see everything. And the crafts were also really popular, so I would say it was a successful event. And then
With the mustard seed, one more thing, we did have a pair of aides that came back to our Wolf Studio event that was 2 days afterwards, and they were asking us about binoculars, and we had ended up going about an hour and a half over time, and no one had even noticed. They were having such a good time, which is fantastic.
And then, so next we have our World Migratory Bird Day event with the Mississippi Museum of Natural Science. And we had a total of 116 guests, which this was part of the museum's Fun Friday events, which they do as a series during the summer. The museum also said that this was the highest turnout that they had seen for a Fun Friday event. So no one's quite expecting over 100 people, but we were well prepared. We had, I'd say, about 50 to 80 people who interacted with all of our activities, and then 116 for people who interacted with at least one of them. The bird masks and Vince's coloring sheets were very popular, as well as a common bird identification zine foldable that I had made, and bird buttons that Vince had designed. And then we also did a scavenger hunt around the museum's bird exhibit to help visitors connect their knowledge of birding to the museum, as well as we talked a lot about bird banding because the museum had a small bingo card for kids to fill out to get a prize if they go to all of these different activities, and one of them was discussing bird banding. So I was able to teach a lot of kids about why bird banding is important and what it has to do with science. So that was a really great experience. And then here are some of our materials we created for the site. So this is my pocket bird guide, and then we have our event poster and the bird scavenger hunt. As well as next we have the buttons that Vince designed himself and drew, which is amazing.
Now, the little buttons, that's the little three, those are house specific buttons. And so that has a hummingbird and a cardinal on it. That is Miss Murley's favorite bird and Mr. Medgar's favorite bird. And they're sitting on a rose bush and a southern magnolia. And so these are those are brought out at the site, and so everyone can take them, and they have a little bit of history with them. They think that's really cool, but secretly they're learning about the birds.
So we had some challenges during our time with the internship. One of them being the lack of exclusively natural areas and trails on site. And the way that we worked with that is that we held most of our events off-site while being able to use Murley's Garden for stationary birding, as well as we were able to utilize the facilities and resources that our partnerships had, such as how we held the mustard seed event at their own campus, which also made it easier for that facility. And we held World Migratory Bird Day at the museum and the Wolf Studio event at their own meditation dojo, as well as birding in their garden over there.
For accessibility, a lot of the issues came from sites being accessible for one type and not others. Excuse me. The sites were that were very accessible were very like ADA based accessibility, and was not really for people that weren't like wheelchair users type of disabled in mind. And so to kind of overcome that and work with that, we just added as many sites as we could possibly to Birdability and went to as many sites as we could.
Another struggle that we had was outreach and communication. We reached out to over 3 times as many organizations as we ended up having partnerships with, including the Mississippi School for the Deaf, Society for Disabilities, an occupational therapy group, a behavioral health group, and a lot of these we just didn't receive any responses. So that was a little bit disheartening, but we focused on communicating effectively and considerably with the organizations that did express interest, while also setting up calls and in-person meetings with all event partners who did work out, so we could make sure that we can make an event that's successful and caters to the needs of the group.
And our last struggle was our biggest struggle was public engagement and creating a birding community basically from scratch. Jackson does have the Audubon Society chapter, but besides that, there really isn't very much of a birding community. Most people will bird kind of alone or with their like family groups. And so it was a challenge kind of getting engagement from people that were already interested in birding. And so we had to build that knowledge and build that kind of passion and interest from scratch. And what we did is we increased our efforts in public advertisement. We started out by just bringing things to libraries and posting it on like social media, putting posters at the actual house. We started doing this earlier, and we started trying to get posters out to as many like different libraries as we could in different areas, instead of just going to like the ones that usually the site will usually use as advertisers. And we also learned that focusing on organizational partnerships will really guarantee us an audience, and that creating the outreach really needed the audience that the partnerships were able to afford us. And by those partnerships, we were able to create a lot of interest, and we got to see a lot of people have that door open for them for the love for the environment. God.
So, for some future improvements we'd like to look at for the park is maybe improving the bird feeder setup in Merle's garden, because we added a bird feeder setup as one of our ways to improve birding in the garden. But we could add some oriole or hummingbird feeders to try to increase species diversity. We'd also maybe like to, in the education and outreach of the park itself, we could help emphasize how conservation connects with the site. And for accessibility, we could add tactile elements, braille, or descriptive audio to park signage, because the park signage doesn't have any blind or low vision accessible features right now. And then one thing that we've set up before we leave to be an improvement is that the park has put together birding bags with binoculars and field guides for visitors to check out for free, which is one way that we're helping reduce the financial and material barriers that come with birding.
Our final thoughts, just some other projects that I was not able to fit in for the events. I've done some painting along with the garden to bring in more gardening and bring more of an effort to show the birds in the garden for the house during different events, as well as I've made some other zines and done some other little things here and there that are little educational art projects. I've really found that interpretation work is what I've always wanted to do. Since I was a little kid, I wanted to learn forever and teach people what I know and why I like it and why I think it's important. And this has really been eye-opening to see that that's exactly what this is. And I've been able to see so many people have their interest for bird click in their minds, where I've seen people really make sure that they ask me for a coloring sheet during an event because they want that bird feeder instruction on the back, or people asking me to like what binoculars I have, where they should get their own binoculars, and just seeing that interest be sparked has definitely been one of my favorite parts. And the last thing is that I really did find that when most people think about accessibility, they think about physical accessibility, especially surrounding wheelchairs and wheelchair users, rather than every other mode accessibility comes in, especially not even just pertaining to disability. Accessibility as an access for everyone, period, is not something that a lot of people think about when the conversation of accessibility is brought up. The inclusivity and intersectionality is usually left out. And so it was very interesting to get to work on that from a well-rounded perspective.
And then for me, I really appreciated discovering and participating in the intersections between the Ever's social justice legacy, the modern struggles for equity amidst injustice, and then the benefits of increasing access to nature and birding for marginalized communities. that community and social justice lens through being a historical monument was a really unique and important experience with me because I was able to take away a greater understanding and a drive to continue learning how I can apply my knowledge of conservation and wildlife in a way that truly benefits both nature and communities. Because through this internship, I was able to see a lot more of the ways that wildlife conservation and communities are connected.
Amazing. Great job, AG and Vince. Really inspirational presentation, honestly. We love to hear what you have taken away from it and all the things you've done. Um, Looking at the chat, there's so many comments and um, your supervisors love you. Any questions from the audience? Susan.
Hey, that was, well, all of you are doing a great job. And I think that this is the first time we've had a position in this type of site. So that's really great to see what a success you were there. I was wondering what you think Medgar and Murley, the site, will be doing now that you're not going to be there. How will they continue this work? And did you leave them with anything, or will they carry it on, or what do you expect them to do?
I actually, because I live in Jackson, will be continuing some of the work on site. And so I'm going to be doing whatever I can to do different events to continue helping people in the Jackson area get connected to birding. In September, the Natural Science Museum is having Science Fest, which is with a bunch of other museums in Jackson. And I'm doing a little avian architects table, hopefully. And so little things like that where regardless of if it's volunteer work in Jackson, if I'm working, I'm going to make sure that the site still has those connections, and I'm going to be able to continue some of the building that's been done here.
That's
And
excellent.
I unfortunately will be leaving because I'm from North Carolina. I go to college in Virginia, so I will be departing. But I think that having those resources that the park will be able to physically give out to people to borrow with the binoculars and the bird guides will leave the park in a good spot for being able to create a connection to birding, as well as the bird feeder setup in the garden. I think makes it easy for the garden birding the garden birding to continue after we're gone, because that's something that is at the park and can easily be incorporated into the park schedule and the rounds of activities. So, and it can also just be a way for visitors to enjoy the garden casually. It doesn't have to be necessarily a specific birding event, but now it's just part of the garden. We've been getting a lot more species, some house finches, some woodpeckers, chickadees, birds that we had never seen there before we put up the bird feeders. So I think that's going to be a really good way that the visitors can help be connected to birding casually just through experiencing the garden as well.
Oh, that's great. Well, thanks so much for all your great work. We hope to continue that also from Environment for the Americas and make sure they know we're still here too. So thanks. That was great work.
We have another question from Amanda. Go ahead.
What program that you guys ran made you feel the most, like either the most success or the most satisfied with your work there?
I would probably say World Migratory Bird Day because it was really cool to have a bunch of kids running around, and apparently a lot of them. We were told by the museum staff that a lot of them were asking like, "Where's the birds? I want to see the bird stuff." So it was really cool to get to hear that people were super excited and interested in what we were doing, and it was really cool to see as well. The museum welcomed us with such open arms, and they were really happy to have us as part of the event. So it was a great experience, and we were able to connect with so many people and teach so many people new things. So I think that was the most satisfying event for me.
For me, I think definitely the mustard seed event, because seeing that literally no one like looked at their phone to like see time, no one wanted to see a clock. Like everyone was just there birding and was so happy to be birding that we went an hour and a half overtime when it was really hot out was fantastic, especially the fact that both aides spent one day away from birding and then came back to our other event. Made me really, really happy. And so I think that that event was definitely best feeling.
So good, so good. I think we might have one, like another quick question from Aiden.
Yeah, AG Vince, amazing job as always. I'm so proud of y'all's work. One of the big things for accessibility work, especially because there's two of y'all, and at least for AGs and going back to North Carolina, how one of the big questions I have is how were you able to train your staff or help educate your fellow staff members and other rangers on the proper accessibility things, just so you can incorporate those things going forward.
So that's definitely something that we're going to be working on, especially as we're wrapping up our internship. Is figuring out how to transition a lot of these programs. It's going to help to have Vince stay a little bit longer, um, as well. But we're going to be looking at how we can maybe start to implement some of those changes that I talked about, like maybe adding tactile elements or braille to signage. But a lot of the accessibility work that we did was outside of the park boundaries itself. So it translated more to the events that were off-site, held on different trails around the area.
Yeah, I was gonna say, luckily, Early Garden was, as y'all saw in the best accessibility. So that actually ended up being pretty good on site, and so we have a little bit less work to do, luckily, on that front.
Great. Awesome job.
Thanks, you guys.
Yes, thank you.
Amazing job. We're just gonna take a few minute break. So a quick break, like come back at 3:08, I'm gonna say. 3 minute break. And then we will have Lily presenting.
Are we ready, Forrest?
I think we're ready. We back? Is Lily ready?
I am ready,
Okay,
I
great.
think.
Take it away.
All right, okay. Deep breaths. Hi, guys. I'm Lily. I'm the Let's Go Birding intern stationed at Colorado National Monument this summer. A little bit about me before I go into site specifics. I was diagnosed with multiple neurodivergent conditions around the wee age of 12 or 13. And it's become a very large part of my identity that I adore. I got to that place of acceptance by observing the biodiversity in the world around me that reminded me that my diversity is as natural as the different birds I hear and see. Grew up in Florida, which is a cool place for a blossoming birder to grow up because there is a permanent population of otherwise migratory birds because of Florida's consistent climate. And now I live in North Carolina, which you may realize is a little ways away from where I am this summer, 1,900 miles, give or take, from the Colorado National Monument. This is a monument, a national park unit, right in the middle of the Utah-Colorado border. Did this slide change? Okay. Okay, perfect. This is a national park unit right in the middle of the Utah-Colorado border, defined as a high-altitude desert environment. Pretty self-explanatory. But despite our high altitude of around 6,000 feet, we experience extreme heat and very arid climate. So our flora and fauna are highly adapted to our desert environment. Next slide, please. For example, we have 484 species of plants, including our pretty little desert 4 o'clock right here. It blooms at night, so it is completely pollinated by moths. Also, in the top middle, we have kind of the face of the monument, our desert bighorn sheep. It is the desert subspecies as opposed to our Rocky Mountain subspecies. Our desert bighorn are around 60 pounds lighter, and they can go up to 4 days without water. Down at the bottom, we have one of our 23 reptile and amphibian species. The bottom right, yeah, the bottom right, our collared lizard. He is currently on our biking jersey that we sell in our visitor center store. And then in the middle are our creatures of the hour. 164 bird species, give or take, call the monument home, including our little pinyon jay right in the middle, who occupies our pinyon juniper woodlands. And fun fact, their genus name, which I can't pronounce because I hate Latin, means bare nostrils, because these guys, unlike most corvid species, don't have feathers at the base of their nostrils to make prying into sticky, sappy, immature pine cones a much less messy endeavor. Now, you may notice on this slide of highly adaptable species, humans do not make the cut, which I learned this summer. And that was probably the most prominent obstacle that I had to overcome when developing my programs. On a normal day, we have a lot of deterrent weather factors. We have relentless sun and multiple 3-digit days in a row. This on the right is the current forecast for the next week. We also have very little shade because our pinyon juniper woodlands are particularly vertically stunted. And if that wasn't bad enough, the 30,000 acre wildfire that burned for a couple weeks 10 miles away from the monument was definitely a deterrent. As an East Coaster, it was a little terrifying. I almost had to evacuate my housing. And the smoke dropped our air quality down, or brought it up real bad. I don't know how that works. It was really smoky. It was very scary, and I don't blame anybody for not coming to my programs during that period of time. And then just in general, canyons are kind of identified by their sweeping, rugged cliffs of sandstone and other rock layers. And that doesn't always go hand in hand with physical accessibility. So I had a bit of trouble trying to develop my programs around all of these physical limitations. And that's when I discovered this statistic: trigger warnings for a brief discussion on suicide. Colorado is part of the nation's suicide belt, where most people who take their lives go to do so because they want their final moments to be in picturesque, scenic landscapes. In Mesa County specifically, which is the county that encapsulates Grand Valley and the monument, our suicide rate was 2.2 times higher than the national rate as of 2024. And that's accredited to kind of a culture of rugged individualism in the Southwest. You got cowgirls and cowboys and blue-collar jobs, you getting your hands dirty, as well as a widespread access to firearms. and isolation caused by wide swaths of land in between communities that make mental health care largely inaccessible. So, as a neurodivergent individual who has experienced suicidal ideation in the past, I began to consider how I could accommodate this specific community in my programs. And I came to the conclusion that I would split my programs into two. So these are some posters that I designed this summer. On the left is my Let's Go Birding physically accessible walks that I held down in the valley where it's much flatter and where there are many more paved accessible trails. One property in particular that I love to utilize was the Audubon Preserve, and I will highlight it later because it's amazing. And then on the left, or on the right, was my Birding for Neurodivergence program. That was held exclusively in the monument because different physical needs were not as much of a consideration. I tried to create a sensory-friendly, safe space within the monument to talk not just about birds, but the general biodiversity of the monument. I also, not pictured here, held a back porch beginner-friendly birding program on Thursdays because birding can be a little intimidating to get into. There are so many birds that you'll want to memorize, both their appearances and their behaviors and their calls. So this was specifically marketed as a beginner-friendly program, even though they all were, to kind of decrease that intimidation a bit. Next slide, please. These are some pictures from my programs, starting all the way on the left. This was one of my first neurodivergence programs that got some traction, thanks to our VIP Terry here. She has been a volunteer at the park for, I think, going on 20 years now. She would hate me for not knowing the exact number, but she saw that I was struggling to get traction, and she spread the word because over 20 years, you make some amazing connections. And we had a fun little hike through Echo Canyon, which is one of the only spots in the monument where you have a riparian environment. There was water in the desert. It was amazing. Down at the bottom middle was my first Up Close and Personal. That was a program that existed before I arrived at the monument, where the rangers scheduled for the Up Close and Personal for the day can decide on whatever topic they wish to give a program on. Could you guys guess what I chose? Birds. And it quickly became one of my favorite programs because of the close visitor interactions that I got. This little guy in the front and center is a interaction that will stick with me for a while. His name was Rhett, and it was almost like cinematic how the interaction played out. He came up to me, he shook my hands, and he went, "I want to be a national park ranger." I thought that only happened in cheesy movies, but it was adorable, and I wanted to nurture his enthusiasm, so I asked, "What national park would you want to work at the most?" He goes, "Redwood, because banana slugs are my favorite animal." It was so cute. And he came to another one of my later programs, one of my last Let's Go Birding walks, where our VIP Terry actually got this amazing picture of me passing off a damselfly to Rhett's hand. I love this picture because I think it perfectly captures what I aim to achieve with my interpretation. And then down at the bottom right was my last neurodivergence hike of the internship, where I met this amazing father-daughter birding duo, Alyssa and Jake. Alyssa is currently a junior in high school, but I pointed her in the right direction to possibly apply for the Let's Go Birding program in the future. So I might have passed on a torch, and I'm very proud to say that. Next slide. This is a program that I was honored to tag along with. In the bottom left, you can see my education tech supervisor, Nicholas. He's on furlough right now. I miss you, dude. But he let me tag along. Camp Abilities Colorado is a summer camp spread across the state that aims to empower youth who are blind or low vision. So they reached out to the Colorado National Monument and asked if we could help them host a blind hike, which absolutely. We had 7 athletes, youth who are blind or low vision, as well as 2 adults who are blind or low vision, and we took them along our Devil's Kitchen Trail, which is 1.5 miles round trip, and it's relatively easy until you get to the end, where there's this large slab of slick rock that you need to traverse, and it's so difficult that we normally don't even take our school field trips on that hike. These kids did amazing. I believe 6 of the 7, oh my gosh, 6 of the 7 of them made it up to the very top into the Devil's Kitchen rock formation. But my favorite part about this program was that we had 3 new cane users. 3 of the 7 athletes came in without a cane. One of them did not have a cane. One of them refused to use a cane, and one of them had a cane that was too small for her to use properly. And by the end of the program, they fell in love with Aftersight, a local organization in the Valley, their Urban Explorer cane that is especially designed to handle tougher terrains. It was amazing. They liked it so much that one of the moms even called back a few weeks after the program to rave about how much her kid loved the cane. It was adorable. And then finally, this is probably the program that I am most proud about. This was my Monument on Tap. It is a lecture series held by the Colorado National Monument Association. That is kind of a Friends of the Parks affiliates down in the valley. And Jess, there, if she's watching, hi. I don't know if she is, but Jess, the program manager, asked if I wanted to be the July main event. So I said yes. And it was a really cool way to challenge my social anxiety. I had a bunch of stage fright, but it went so well, partially because of my amazing, super engaged audience of around 40 members of CNMA, as well as NPS employees and volunteers. I say 40 because there was a cap out for registration, but some people snuck past our bouncers. I split my talk into 3 parts. First, accessibility in the National Park Service and what that has historically looked like. Shout out the PAVE team. I saw Katie Ryan in here earlier. Then birding, obviously, and then accessible birding, which was the more reflective portion of what I had achieved thus far in my internship. Afterwards, I got a bunch of questions, including how does one get into birding? To which I think my biggest piece of advice is just to go with someone who is more experienced than you, because their repetition will become memorization for you incredibly quickly. All right, next slide, please. Oh, I can't see it. Hold on, I'm gonna wait for it to load. I believe it's my alcove trail. Okay, well, we're gonna keep talking. I wanted to highlight some sites that were yes, perfect, I remembered correctly. I wanted to highlight some sites that were kind of a diamond in the rough in our very rugged canyon country. Starting off with the Alcove Nature Trail. That is the only designated accessible trail in the monument, and it's where I kind of got my footing, where I had my first programs to figure out what worked best for me. And I realized that I like really small groups because I can make it a more personable experience, but that's for later. It is a 1 mile round trip hike, but only half of it is accessible. There's a 7% average grade, so not horrible, but not great either. And it's hiking only, so there are no bikes or ATVs or dogs. My favorite part about this trail is how comprehensive its information is about the ecology of the monument. It is our interpretive trail, so there's actually a brochure that you can receive at the visitor center or at the trailhead that you can read along with as you pass certain markers on the trail. It's super fun. It's a short little hike. It's perfect for the amount of heat that you're probably going to want to tolerate. Yeah. Next slide. The Audubon property, I mentioned it before. First of all, I wanted to thank Carrie, if she's here. Carrie Atwood is one of the leading figures in the Grand Valley Audubon Society. She was my mentor when it came to the West Slope bird species, because again, I'm an East Coaster. But yeah, the Audubon Preserve was a beautiful riparian location, 1.5 miles round trip of a loop trail with minimal slope. Hiking and biking are allowed. There were also multiple different trail surfaces. You go from asphalt to gravel to packed soil to some sand. But my favorite part about this property are the 2 paved bird blinds that are completely accessible to get to. And I saw 4 lifers at those bird blinds today, including 2 that I'm not sure how I lived in Florida for 15 years and didn't see. I saw a belted kingfisher and a black-crowned night heron. Those were super cool. And then finally, the Devil's Kitchen Trailhead was where I hosted most of my neurodivergent programs. Sorry, I meant to mention the Audubon Preserve is where I had most of my Let's Go Birding programs. Devil's Kitchen was an amazing location to meet up because it actually forks off into 4 different trails. And so I would start my programs by gauging the capabilities, the desires, and kind of the general demographics of my attendance for that program. And I would pivot depending on the needs that needed to be met. So if there were some younger children in the crowd, I would take them on the easier Devil's Kitchen Trail. But if there were more mature individuals who maybe wouldn't complain about the difficulty of Echo Canyon. That is my favorite trail in the monument, like I said. And at the end, in the alcove of Echo Canyon, it has a really cool echo effect, as the name would imply. And I learned that it's pretty calming for my anxiety specifically. And so I like to imagine that it's helpful for other neurodivergent individuals as well. It's a very quiet environment, very secluded trail. I think I've seen 4 people max on the trail with me at the same time. Next slide, please. Now, my visitation statistics, the meat of it all, Over the course of 9 weeks, I held 4 reoccurring programs for a total of 31 individual events, and I interacted with a total of 292 visitors/locals. I wanted to point out, as you're looking at the layout of my programs, you might notice that a disproportionate amount I interacted with at the up close and personal. I want to mention that is the only one that was provided indoors. So the weather was definitely like a proven factor in my attendance. Again, don't blame them. It was hot out. It is hot out. Monument on Tap was also inside, but again, there was like a registration cap. 40 was the minimum, or was the maximum. But yeah, I really enjoyed, especially those small groups. The neurodivergent birding, I think at most I had 2 or 3 on each walk. And that was a really nice environment to build a personal connection. And it's also a little bit easier to hear the birds, I've learned. In my larger groups, it was a bit more difficult for me to kind of maintain control over the progression of the walk. I'm reading the chat. I should close it. I'm getting so hyped up right now. Now this is, next slide, this is a graph of my attendance over the course of my internship. And as you can see, in these beginning 2 weeks, I struggled to get my footing until CNMA and the Grand Valley Audubon Society stepped in. Jess and Carrie were both very helpful with getting my name out on their websites. So now I'm officially Googleable. I show up on the web, which is crazy. Around week 3 is when I started to seriously market. Went around to my local coffee shop, shout out Best Slope, local pizza place, shout out Hot Tomato, as well as the local recreation center and libraries. And you do see that giant spike in attendance. I don't know what was going on at week 4, but it was welcome. And then we kind of settled back down to a consistent double digits. It was super fun. And this is a graph of my personal reoccurring events. So this does not include my Monument on Tap or my up close and personals because that existed before I arrived at the monument. I know I liked your graphs too, Vincent and AG. Now, my recommendations. You have to consider this is if funding was not a concern. First, I just have to say devices. Devices. Amanda and Zach mentioned them briefly, but I think especially in Canyon Country, some of those all-terrain wheelchairs or track chairs would be an incredible addition to the park. Specifically on the Alcove Trail, I think that auditory devices would be an incredible addition because, as I said, there is an interpretive brochure that can go along, that you can read along with the trail, and it is the only designated accessible trail in the monument. In our visitor center exhibit hall, we have auditory devices that will give you an auditory tour describing the exhibits and then reading the actual information. And I think that including auditory devices on the Alcove Trail will let individuals who are blind or low vision experience a more comprehensive monument like portrayal. I also think that we should capitalize on infrastructure that is already accessible because, again, it's really hard to find physical accessibility in Canyon Country. Our visitor center is amazing. ADA compliant bathrooms, ADA compliant water refill stations, a beautiful back porch with a sweeping canyon view. We have a native plant garden in the front of the visitor center that is not shaded. And so I would love to see if possibly in the future some more like native garden area could be added in the back porch where it is shaded and a bit quieter than where the cars are coming through. This is a bit of an ask as well, because in monuments and national parks, you are not supposed to feed the wildlife. That is a very core principle. We want them to remain wild. But I think in the future, possibly a bird feeder or 2 would be fun. But if not, those native plants would definitely welcome more of the native bird population closer to the visitor center to be observed. And then finally, I think everybody so far has touched on this, but I think increased outreach on the NPS side to promote partnership is super important. Because again, I want to go back to the Camp Abilities Colorado example. They were very hesitant to reach out to us because we don't market too much accessibility in this monument. And I think that if we did more of the reaching out to ensure that there were accessible experiences available, we would have a lot more engagement with the community of disabled individuals in the valley. Okay, and then my final thoughts, my 2 cents. I was paid more than that, I promise. But first, You don't need to drive 1,900 miles to discover who you are, but the distance definitely helps. This summer has been such a formative experience. I've met so many amazing people. I've made so many amazing connections. Charlie's on here right now. I know that he commented. Amber's watching. Kate's watching. Nathan, my superintendent's watching. That's crazy. But I experienced so much this summer. My social skills definitely improved, interacting with visitors. I taught myself how to parallel park. That was crazy. That was the first thing I did when I got to Colorado. So yeah, I think I've definitely come into myself a bit more. I'm so much more confident. I know exactly what I want to do with my career now. And I think interpretation is, like Amanda and Zach said, the ultimate customer service experience. We said this a lot in training, but one of the best ways to get people to care about conserving a resource is to get them to build that emotional connection with the resource. And I loved doing that this summer. Second, accessibility will never be perfect, but I think inclusivity can get dang near close. Every individual with a disability is an individual. They are unique. No one has had an identical experience. So no matter how much accessible infrastructure you develop, you will not be able to accommodate everyone, but your attitude can. That is the most important thing. The, again, Camp Abilities Colorado hike was far from perfect. It had a lot of stumbles, but the attitude throughout the hike was super motivating and enthusiastic. And I think that really assisted the kids in reaching the end of the trail. And then finally, rejection therapy. I've worked on that a lot with my anxiety. But I've learned this summer that it can only end well. Introduce yourself and ask to participate. I have gained so many incredible experiences, from raptor nest monitoring this summer to, again, the blind hike. I did some rare plant surveying, which was super cool. I became a bit of a botanist in my time here. It was amazing, and I really think that just introducing yourself opens so many doors. So yeah, that was my experience at Colorado National Monument. I will be back. I love Canyon Country. Yeah, if there are any questions, I will be happy to answer them because I like to talk.
Thank you so much.
Ryan, plug yourself. Sorry.
Great presentation. Great presentation.
Thank you. Oh yes, thank you, Kate. I meant to shout out to you. Oh my gosh, sorry, Kate. You are Kate's my supervisor. She's probably like in the room right next to me. I love you so much. You're amazing. Thank you for the donuts yesterday or 2 days ago. Okay, sorry, Stephanie.
No, yeah, go ahead. I was looking at the comments. Go ahead, Kat.
I just need to know who the other two lifers were, Belted Kingfisher and the Heron Bunny.
Oh, we can't hear you.
You sound a little far away. No, that's worse.
This computer problems, man.
Now we can't hear you. Maybe you can type it.
I heard Kat say you
was-
want to know what the other two lifers are, right, Kat?
Yes, that is exactly it.
Hey, and there's your audio.
I was scared about running out of time. I saw wood ducks, which were super cool. I saw a mama and like 3 babies. They were chilling up pretty close. And then I heard a blue grosbeak, but for the life of me, I could not find him. Oh my gosh, she had such a pretty song, and it would have been such a pretty bird, but I could not pinpoint this little guy.
That's awesome. That's great. Thanks, Lily. And Susan has a question as well.
Yeah, first I want to say I just love your flyers. You're so good at the graphic design. Forrest
Thank
has been
you.
showing them around the office, and we've been looking at them going, "Whoa, that's so cool."
Are you
So
serious?
thanks first for your creativity and your design skills. I was wondering where you put those flyers and how much you think they contributed to bringing people into your programs.
So I had some spies working for me actually down in the valley. One of my amazing roommates this summer, Julie, she is an architect at the monument. I had her go sit down in Best Slope Coffee right near my poster, and she told me she heard multiple times people going, "Ooh, birding," and take a picture. So that was really cool. So I know they helped a bit. I think the biggest contribution to my attendance, however, was them being posted online on the CNMA websites and on the Grand Valley websites, because those were already established organizations within the monument who have more repertoire than I do. So again, shout out to Jess and Carrie for helping me with that. But I think those two had the most impact.
Okay.
Yeah,
Good.
especially after my monument. Sorry, especially after my monument on tap, I had a lot of people come up to me because the monument on tap consisted a lot of CNMA members, and a lot of people came up after me and said, "Oh, I wish I'd heard about this sooner." So that was fun.
Great to know. We'll definitely keep those tips in mind for
Mhm.
next. And
There's a
Forrest,
question. There's a
yeah.
question in the chat. I designed them on Canva. I avoided using any generative AI, and I designed some of the little graphics myself, actually. Like the squirrel and the swallows on the design with my posters were digitally drawn by me.
Love that.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Lily.
Thank you guys. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Absolutely. Next, we have Aiden.
Whoop, whoop.
Pull
Right. Hello, everyone. Thank you. Happy afternoon. Hope everyone's having a great day. And I'm excited to kind of bring this amazing group of presentations to an end. Not sure if I can outshine Lily's, but I'm going to try my best to be right on par with her. But again, my name is Aiden Brown, he, him. I was the Rocky Mountain National Park intern here in Colorado. Similarly to Lily, I am actually born and raised in Virginia. And this is my first time actually traveling outside of the Eastern Standard Time Zone. So Colorado is a very new place for me. And I actually had no previous birding experience for this. As many of my amazing peers knew, I came into this with no birding knowledge. I'm originally a special education teacher and accessibility consultant. So this was something that I've felt I've gotten a lot of personal growth in. And as this time goes on, you'll see that not only was I able to help teach a lot of other things, but I think I've been able to grow a little. I think I've been able to grow a little bit. Like I finally know this is that my little friend here is actually a mountain bluebird. Took me a while to figure that out, but I got it. Next slide, please. Cool. So I was based on the Rocky Mountain, on the we call it the Colorado River District side. So I was on the side close to the Grand Lake, close to right on the well on the edge of the Colorado River in what we call the Comanche Valley. The entire park, however, ranged over 450 square miles of space. Right here on the west side, we are about 250. So we go down here on the Grand Lake side, right on the entrance of the Grand Lake town, all the way up to the Alpine Visitor Center at 11,597 feet. We have a lot of different, because we have such a good altitude differences in our park, we actually have four distinct environments that guests are able to go through. So we have our montane regional environment, kind of our meadows, our big valleys. Currently, where I'm hosted on right here at about 7,597 feet. We have the subalpine and then our alpine environment, which plateaus at the top of 14,183 feet on the other side of the park. But on our side, we top out at about 12,500 feet. In addition, we have a lot of riparian water-based environments, especially in the montane and a lot of our alpine lakes. Additionally, the Trail Ridge Road is one of the highest paved roads in the United States at 12,183 feet in elevation. And is the main road going through the park, which I will elaborate on more on why I think that's important for this slide. And most importantly, the fact that I didn't know, I think, until week 5, actually, very surprisingly, we actually have 270 different species of bird that actually make their home in the park. We have about 360 that like to migrate through the park, but we have 270 about species that like to settle in the park, especially. So that's about 75% of our entire population of the park actually lives in this park. Very exciting. Next slide. Additionally, when I met with my amazing supervisors, Sarah, Christy, and Itai, one of the big things that we wanted to work on, rather than focus on one specific dis- disability community, is to work on actually implementing universal design principles. As especially, which I will note later, unfortunately, the world is not 100% accessible, and no matter how hard you try, you unfortunately can't guarantee accessibility for one, as something that is accessible in an accommodation for one could be actually something that inhibits someone else from participating. So one of the big things is worked on how can we provide the most universally designed experience. And we did this by actually having most of our programming on our two ADA certified accessible trails, which is our Coyote Valley, which is that CV, and then our Holsworth Historic Site. And then additionally, I had a lot of work done at two different visitor centers, but the one I'm currently standing at is the Comanche Visitor Center right here on the valley, and then our Alpine Visitor Center. And then on right, we have a picture of Grand Lake on the top. And then we have a wonderful picture of some of the other fish and feather interns and I in Estes Park during our wonderful training week. Next slide. Say during my time here at Rocky Mountain National Park, I had four unique programs that I was able to kind of do on a weekly consistent basis. Below on the you see a lot of different photos of the amazing programs and things I was able to take during my time here. But these weekly rotation programs were kind of as follows. We had our critter chats, which were 30-minute formal based programs followed by 30-minute informal kind of table segments, kind of right on the brink of 1 to 2 p.m. every day. We had this originally. This program was intended to help give visitors another activity to do due to our time entry reservation system, which I will elaborate more on eventually. We'll have had a lot of restrictions from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. and our tickets for getting into the park were actually very limited. So one of our ways to help elevate the visitor experience with a program that happened right before our time entry, and that was one of the many things I got to do. I presented on first how to on the many sparrows in the park. We have about 23 different subspecies of sparrow in the park that I was able to elaborate on, and then tell people how to specifically identify sparrows, because sparrows are one of the birds that actually I got to learn pretty fast, and one of the bird species that helped me start to identify other birds because there's so many vibrant characteristics. Additionally, we had our junior ranger and our junior angler programs. These were weekly programs that I do with the team, so it's not something I would do individually. We had about a team of 4 of us that would go out every Thursday and every Friday with an informal tabling event. Our junior ranger program, we had weekly revolving topics where I got to not only be in charge of our bird-based programs, but I got to help with our wildflower and our wildflower management junior ranger activities, which, as someone who comes from Virginia and also had no idea what wildfires were until I got to Grand County, was a very elevating experience, a lot of personal growth. In our junior angler program, as someone who never even knew how to do our traditional fishing method, was also a very big growth asset for me. We had our 3-hour programs on Fridays where we did adaptive fly fishing. So when I was there, I was very specifically helping our people with disabilities. So since I had a lot of our special education based training, and one of the biggest things that we had this internship was that, again, I didn't know how to fish, and I was teaching other people how to fish and how to make adaptations without big equipment, which was something I was extremely proud of. And then the last final thing, especially as a Let's Go Birding intern, you have to have a bird walk in your program, which was something I was super excited to give. I give weekly bird walks alongside our junior angler programs at our Coyote Valley. Those ones were about 1 hour to 1 hour 15 minutes, and kind of ranged on a flat surface. We went through some different montane and riparian environments. And sometimes our weekly bird walks also turned into moose jams because we had a lot of moose, and especially during the rut season, we had a lot of babies on the trail. And sometimes we found more moose than babies, and that's more moose than birds, and that's totally okay. We used our activity as both a wellness activity to learn to notice nature and not just kind of rush on the trail. And then I also want to give a quick shout out to Diane, one of our amazing birdability captains, who came to actually coach me on my bird walk. She was featured on the bottom left side. And then additionally, with the 4 weekly programs I also had 8 different unique programs, which I really enjoyed giving. We had informal pop-up programs outside of the KVC. So those ones involved different bird banding activities. I got to do a lot of bird matching games, kind of physical activity paired with science lessons, which I really enjoyed. We also have our World Migratory Bird Day, which I'm actually giving on Friday here at the County 2 Visitor Center. I'm also giving a pop version of this pop-up program tomorrow with our YMCA of Snow Mountain Ranch. But unfortunately, since that is an event tomorrow, I don't have the fun photos or information to tell you about it yet. And then our other fun community partnerships that I've been able to work on is working again with the YMCA. And then we also had our National Sports Center for the Disabled partnership, which we had our adaptive fly fishing in the Rockies events, in which I helped them actually develop curriculum to do an adaptive birding event even after I'm supposed to leave. So I'm sad I won't be able to participate in those, but I'm happy to have been able to be a consultant in those for the varieties and helping the amazing people at the National Sports Center for Disabled get to do programs both in Denver and in our kind of central Colorado area. And additionally, we did some work with the ARC of Larimer County as well, especially in regards to accessible, kind of making it adaptive recreation and asking the right questions for people with disabilities who want to engage with national parks, but don't know the right steps to get there. All right, next slide. And additionally, just to give some fun pictures, because who doesn't love a couple pictures or two? These are some of the kind of tablings that I've done. I got to do tutorials on learning how to use bird guides, because before this, I didn't know how to use a bird guide. And I think AG remembers when I panically tried to say, "What's that bird?" It was a mountain chickadee. Took them 2 seconds, but it took me 5 minutes to find in the book. We also had binocular tutorials. We called it our binocular bucket. We have over 20 binoculars we're allowed to loan on this side of the park. And one of the big things of my tablings is that we actually had a couple of American robin nests right above where I was presenting. So one of the best things we got to do is actually watch the babies hatch during each of our critter chats, as we got to teach people how to use binoculars. Additionally, I got to do some kind of large text-based bird learning. We do a lot of kind of visual analysis of what some of the birds are, and listening to a lot of our All About Bird sites to be able to learn how to bird by sound. And additionally, we also had some wellness coloring activities, as seen on the right picture, which I really enjoyed because that's something I always enjoy coloring. And I'm a teacher, so coloring is most of the activities I do anyway, especially as a math teacher. Next slide. And I think my favorite thing that I've gotten to do so far, incorporating my background in special education, is the creation of our communication boards. So this communication boards is something that supports communication through pictures and words, and especially something that I use a lot in previous internship and work experience as an accessibility consultant. This was something I kind of drafted before from a previous museum-based internship, and one of the best things about this project is actually I get to consult with the entire Let's Go Birding crew. I'm really grateful for the entire Let's Go Birding team. Kat Frivley, Katie Campbell, Katie Ryan, all these amazing people that I've been able to get input on for this project, especially as someone who wasn't familiar with kind of adaptive recreation in a sort of like outdoor sense and more of like the arts. This was a very interesting project for me, especially figuring out what's the most inclusive language that we can put to make sure that this appeals to all people, all disability communities, and then also what symbols best work in circumstances. We had about a month and a half of a drafting process with this project where we settled on kind of a visual identification page, a locational identification page, where I got to teach people all the different environments that birds were in, as well as our kind of clock system for directions, and then the basic advocating for yourself, such as the I need and I feel board. Again, thank you to the amazing Let's Go Birding interns, who I sent about, I think maybe 10 drafts in our group me with different updates. Next slide. Kind of just based on the audience data, and I'll get into some of the feedback we had. These were some of the numbers that we had based on the programs I was able to gather. One of our critter chats, because they were about 1 to 2 p.m. in our Rocky Mountain time, that's about 12 p.m. to 5 p.m. is kind of our monsoon time. So we have a lot of intense thunderstorms and hail. So a lot of our time actually was the best thing. Oh, excuse me. A lot of the times I actually got rained out of that program, unfortunately. So my program average is definitely a little bit lower than some of the other programs I was able to do. But instead, I actually had a lot of people show up for the bird walks. One of my favorite things is I had a group of 55 people over the 4th of July weekend show up for one bird walk, which was, for me, very scary. My classroom size is about 28 people, so having 55 people on one was definitely a very exciting experience and also very good for learning because I've never had a group that big. And again, on average, about 26 people on that, which is not a bad size for birding. On our junior ranger program, that was an informal program of about 3 hours. So we had about 185 people, especially our junior ranger programs that we did, average about 40. And then with our pop-ups, we had about 119 people just in one session at the Alpine Visitor Center. And additionally, over the special events I've calculated, we also had almost 300 patrons for our National Sports Center for Disabled partnership. And I had my own table and did some own programs for those who are either not wanting to learn how to fly fish or wanted additional programming. So I had right under 100 people, about 35% of visitors were interested in the programs I did, in addition to the programs that we offered with the National Sports Center for Disabled. Next slide. One of the biggest things that I was able to work on is actually getting a lot of feedback from our visitors and our audience members. These are kind of the base things that I took away as some of the generalized comments. One of the best things was actually finding a lot of quick fixes for accessibility. Because we have a lot of different kind of changing weather patterns immediately, and we have a bit of a staff shortage in the NPS and the Rocky Mountain National Park, especially a lot of our trails crew, we have sometimes a lot of environmental barriers that kind of just pop up suddenly. So one of the best things I was able to do is that I actually have time to go out and do some quick fixes while we're on the trail. We had a couple of visitors who had different mobility aids walking through our bridge. The bridge actually ended up being broken one time. So one of the things before we had our construction on it was actually doing kind of a birding sit, or kind of birding standing around and hanging out at the entrance of our parking lot, which surprisingly I learned there's a lot of birds in parking lots. Didn't know that. One of the better favorite things about this as well was that I also got to give a lot of different sensory experiences, especially with one of my friends here that I'm also fidgeting with. We have one of the big things I was able to invest in a lot was actually getting a lot of sensory kits and that. So one of the things we had a lot of kind of bird plushes that we got to bring out to engage with our younger audience. We had a lot of fidgets, pictures, words, books. We brought a lot of different things. So if people didn't want to kind of sit and find birds and join us, they could kind of go to one of our picnic tables, just kind of engage with the activities. And that way I'd have a way to supervise them and also find a way that everyone feels comfortable, because not everyone wants to walk around, especially if it's 7 a.m. in the morning and they want to go to bed. Let's give them something a little later to start off the day with. Another great thing that is kind of out of my control, but something I like to acknowledge, is that all of our programs in the National Park Service on Rocky Mountain National Park are free, or if they have any sort of entry requirement, like through our National Sports Center for the Disabled, we actually waive all the program fees and park entrance fees, which I thought, especially as someone who comes from a low-income household, was definitely something that I want to continue in the future when I work in my classroom. And I think my favorite thing I was able to do was the personalization of the program per groups. We had a lot of programs where things didn't go always right. We had some birds where maybe we saw a bird and then walked for an hour and saw nothing else. We also had some that were we just had a couple of mountain chickadees over the Colorado River doing a show for everyone. Every week was different, and I was very happy to be able to find different ways, both in myself and using our audience interest to help kind of make each program its own week. Next slide. And while we have a lot of different audience feedback for our good things, we also have kind of some improvements that I was able to take away. Well, I just talked about personalization in a good context. The bad part, the kind of negative aspect of personalization that I worked around was having people that didn't have enough kind of that one-to-one ranger time. I've learned a lot of the time through different programs that a lot of people that come to these smaller events want kind of that one-on-one experience to have their own kind of personal ranger tour guide. So when I was kind of, especially that group of 55, when I was facilitating a lot of people kind of didn't have the opportunity to engage with me on how they like, and we had some very good conversations with a couple of different visitor contacts. As I was also kind of explaining earlier in the beginning, birding is not my first ability. It's something I'm still working on, and especially that quick recall in the time is something I'm still working on to this day. I think the only bird I can identify right now on a quick recall is a kind of the mountain bluebird or the ruby crown kinglet, which is something I'm still working on, but I'm trying a lot. And then the other two big things that were kind of out of my control, but things that still impacted our program, was that we had a lot of limited locations, whether that was due to the high incline of a lot of trails. We have a lot of trails that require climbing at a certain early point, or even just have a huge slope at the beginning, or just rock steps that even when I tried to step upon it, it felt like a hurdle, and I didn't enjoy that. And probably the biggest thing I mentioned earlier with our time entry reservations, time entry kind of opens up a month in advance, and that opened mid-process while I was in the park. So a lot of people that had planned their parks pre end of May, early June, weren't aware of this park entry reservation system. So one of the things that kind of we ran into obstacles the most was that people were trying to get in and attend the programs, but because they didn't have a time entry reservation or didn't have the understanding of how to get one, even with kind of a ranger kind of one-to-one assistance, it was hard to get a lot of people to come in the park when they were already upset about not being able to do the things they initially came to do. Next slide. And then I will also just do a quick, I know I'm kind of going a little bit lower on time, but one of the quick things I want to do, and just I'll say thank you to everyone, especially I'm from Virginia. This is a very big new experience for me. I'm a teacher at heart. I'm not a birder. And just kind of like how Lily, AG, and Vincent, everyone saying, everyone has grown a lot during this placement. And I've been very able to make lots of lifelong friends in this thing. I've been able to realize that the National Park Service is something I actually want to do in my future. I always thought I was going to be a classroom teacher and accessibility consultant, but now seeing that there's a pathway to doing that and combining all my loves for the natural environment while we're kind of working in interpretation has been something that has been really amazing. And I just cannot thank anyone else more, especially the FDA staff, for encouraging me, even with all of my nervousness about this program. And especially of interpretation being a skill that was new to me, because interpretation with the goal of getting people to care about something rather than getting something or getting people to learn about something and kind of understand and take standardized assessments and tests. Whereas this was a new teaching style that kind of helped me work on my engagement a lot more. So I'm excited to share that I'm actually going to be a special education math teacher at the high school level in about a week and a half. I start August 5th. And I know that this internship has actually been very grateful for helping me learn how to engagement, especially for a subject as tough as math. So again, thank you to amazing people. And I just wanted to share that real quick before moving forward. To the person who was asking what kind of cake that was a vanilla bean cheesecake I made because I also became a baker while I was here. Like on the top left corner. Vanilla bean cheesecake. I got a little bit of water in it, but that's a different conversation. Next slide. Perfect. I'll move on to our accessibility analysis. I also wanted a quick point. I think Katie Ryan had shared this as well, but our access pass is something that people can get, as well as something I actually was able to get while I was here as someone who's neurodivergent with neurodivergency and also who actually has a couple of new physical disability diagnoses that I just got diagnosed with. So feel free to also look that up. I recommend it a lot as well. It's also better to sign in person too. Next slide. Perfect. This is gonna be a lot of information, a lot of pictures, so I'm gonna go through this as fast as I can. But Coyote Valley was it was 1 mile round trip, full length about 1.3 if you went down the full entire way, even off the trail. About 0.5 and 0.6 miles each way. There's 0 feet of elevation gain on this trail, and especially because this trail sat at about 9,500 feet, and most of our visitors came from the East Coast or kind of the west, like kind of Southern California, where elevation is pretty low. This is a great trail that we recommend to people to kind of who still wanted to hike but were still dealing with some altitude sickness. We have a compacted gravel trail and it also had about 6 feet of trail width with a maximum 10% grade and elevation towards the end with our river. We also had 5 different accessible parking spots on a dirt lot. One of the things that I will talk about eventually is better kind of signage and maintenance of our accessibility, as there were kind of no lines or no indicators of all kind of the access aisles that we wanted for our trails. So a lot of the time we had visitors who actually could not get out of their car because the access aisle for the accessible spot was being blocked by someone who thought it was just a regular parking spot. And then additionally, at this trail, we also have accessible toilets as well. And then we also in the bottom left corner, we also have our kind of dotted line map where it starts at the bottom with our parking lot and kind of sees how we have a general picnic area with a lot of different sitting, a kind of bird sit activities, a lot of picnic tables. This is mainly where I did our bird walk programs because I got to have multiple different stations where if we wanted to have a section of bird sitting at the beginning, we could walk across the river in the riparian environment, sit down on some of the benches and just take the time to relax and hang out. Or as if you wanted to kind of be a little bit more mobile and kind of go down the way, there's also a wide stretch down the kind of center trail along the Colorado River. So visitors could either stay on the path and kind of observe in the kind of spruce forest area, or they could go down to the edge of the water and some of the rocks and kind of observe some of our riparian species. Um, Next slide. Thank you. Holsworth is a very similar trail. On that one, this one's actually a lot more of an open valley area. It's a 0.9 mile round trip. The maximum kind of width of this trail is actually 12.5 feet at the widest, a kind of about 10 feet of width, the kind of just the smallest parts. There's a 2% kind of slope, pretty on the kind of path historic area. And the last maybe 0.1 mile or so, there's about 8% slope when you go to the cabins. We also have accessible restrooms in multiple different places. So we have 2 accessible restrooms at the beginning of the parking lot, kind of in this bottom right corner at the top here. And as you go down, you'll actually have another accessible restroom at the end in the Holsworth Historic Site. Another great benefit of the site is that we have rangers that are actually stationed there. We actually had some who lived there for a little bit during the term of my internship as well. So one of the best things is that we had multiple different ways of assistance. So we had volunteers at the front. So if any guests had any access concerns, we had kind of volunteers that could step away and assist them. And we also had ranger-led programs where accessibility was a kind of core facet in the way that they interpreted the program. And the best thing about this spot, in my opinion, was the picnic tables with extended tops. Next slide. Okay, and as I kind of wrap this presentation, some of the challenges I want to make sure I kind of elaborate on. The biggest thing was our kind of trust and ensuring accessibility in events. When conducting a lot of the outreach we had, some of our community organizations really wanted the assurance that because we are the National Park Service, we wanted the events to be accessible. But because a lot of the recent changes to the federal communication guidelines, we actually had a kind of limited amount of terminology we could use, and especially in a lot of our social outreach. I was told that I wasn't allowed to use the word accessible in my flyers reaching out, as it could get flagged and we could get in trouble. So promoting these events while not being able to use the word accessible in that example was something that was really hard, especially when we were working with big organizations that had a lot of partnerships to choose from and convincing them that we were fully committed to accessibility and inclusion. A lot of other challenges that we faced in this kind of engagement and the entire time was actually our visitor disposition towards birds. One of my first experiences that kind of made me a little nervous about this internship was I was doing my first critter chat and I asked a little girl if she wanted to do birds or if we wanted to engage in an activity about birds. She looked at me like I said Beetlejuice in her face. It was a little bit of an interesting experience. And then the last thing, at least me personally, that I really wanted to do was that I had a really packed work schedule. My work schedule is a little bit different. So mine was kind of based on accessible programming rather than kind of having the time to kind of physically kind of do some physical accessibility guidelines and also kind of being able to do some staff disability-based training. So one of the things that I was trying to be more helpful about, but wasn't able to do just in the capacity I had here, was advocate for accessibility. Especially one of the things is that we don't have a permanent staff member on either the east side or the west side, to my understanding, that works on accessibility. We rely on the wonderful people like Katie Ryan, who help us with our accessibility work programming, but because we don't have always an in-person there, it's just not something that comes to the forefront of our program thinking. Next slide. And that's okay, perfect. And my last thing that I like to kind of talk about is my recommendations. I have a lot of different fun recommendations, so I'll make kind of quick. But the biggest thing that I wanted to talk about was our kind of staff accessibility guidelines. A lot of our staff here actually have a lot of our training kind of ecology, science-based, so they have a lot of like research knowledge, but not a lot of visitor experience knowledge. One of the biggest things that I got to kind of help debrief in our staff meetings was that there are a lot of people who, when we had our National Sports Center for the disabled event, we kind of had separate tables. And a lot of our NPS said, oh, you're disabled or look disabled, even if the person wasn't. They just send them over to the NSCD table. And especially as someone who wanted to create an inclusive environment, kind of being thrown over with no care to another table because you look or are disabled was not really a most welcoming atmosphere. Additionally, we had a couple switchback renovation trails. We had the East Troublesome Fire in October 2020. So a lot of our trails on the Grand Lake side actually are now what we call the burn scar and had to be renovated due to fallen trees. So we have a couple trails that actually now have accessible switchbacks. The only problem is you need to step over a bunch of rock steps to get to the accessible switchback trail. So especially one of the big training aspects is being able to train on what is accessible and how to kind of maintain accessibility and not just one portion, but the entire portion of a visitor's trail. And then the kind of big thing that I wanted to implement and hadn't have the time for was our disability-led feedback groups, especially as I'm one person with one specific disability. I can't advocate for people who have different physical impairments, different mental impairments. So one of the best things that we're trying to implement is finding a way to pay people for their time in a feedback group so we can implement accessibility that works with our visitors because the visitors are advocating for themselves. And especially one of the best things on our trail that we've had some recommendations. Some trails have our wayfinding kind of interpretation signs and wayfinding, but there's a lot of trails that actually don't have many. So I would love to see more kind of wayfinding on our trails. Next slide. And then the last kind of things I'll recommend accessibility wise are kind of tactile maps for our blind low vision individuals. We have a lot of spaces that don't. We have a lot of kind of a large print and a braille guide, but a lot of visitors who identify as blind actually came in said they did not know braille themselves and relied more on audio description, audio text, kind of these different AAV resources. So I would love to either make tactile maps or kind of use some more more audio resources in the park, especially as a lot of our things in here we don't have much staff education. We don't have, let's say, even the training that I requested on some of our equipment for our like audio description, larger like speakers. I never got training on because our staff didn't know how to use it. And then the last two, I know it's 4 o'clock, so I'll hurry up. We have our increasing format for our trail signs. I talk about Braille, large print, and there's a lot of people that wanted to engage but couldn't engage, and so increasing the form of trail signs, especially in our backcountry, where we have a couple more accessible trails that are maybe about 15, 16 miles long. So want to make sure, especially in the backcountry, if someone's going in a little later and doesn't have access to service or walkie-talkie to communicate with our dispatch, that they know where to go. And then I think I repeated the advisory groups for our, and oh, yeah, I remember what I was saying. Yeah, we also have our advisory groups for our inclusive programming, not just accessibility on the physical accessibility side and programs, but having two separate ones. So we kind of have a more concrete goal within each. Next slide. And again, like I said before, this program has been such an amazing experience, especially as someone who has not been in the National Park Service before. This is my first kind of seasonal job. I really have a bigger appreciation for all the National Park Rangers, all the staff, everyone I keep working with has been amazing. And I've truly made some lifelong friendships. And I feel like I've grown a lot, both as a professional person and as a person in general. So I'm really grateful just for EFTA, for Birdability, for the National Park Service, everyone who got the chance to help me kind of get to the spot where I am today, whether that was before I was even hired or applied or while I was here in the park. And the last thing I want to end on, just like Lily said, nothing is ever 100% accessible, but with the right outreach strategies and effort, we can get as close to inclusion and access for everyone. I got to thank you for your time, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Aiden. Great job. So much accomplished. Do we have questions from the audience?
Do you have a favorite Western bird or lifer that you've gotten to see out there?
Yes, I was actually keeping this one a surprise from our Let's Go Birdie group chat. But the other day, I actually had the chance in our Alpine Center to see what we call our willow ptarmigan.
Nice.
I was very excited too. So that was the kind of the main bird, the kind of alpine bird, the rarest one we have. So seeing that was a very big surprise. I'll send the photo to people later, but it was amazing. We found on our flat top mountains close to Bear Lake on the east side.
That's very cool. Very cool. Oh, Susan has a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. So again, Forrest has been sharing some of everyone's materials around the office, and I really loved a lot of your engagement. I don't know what you call them, but some of your tools that you used with your groups. And I liked the one that asked, like how you were doing today, and it had smiley faces and things like that on it. I wanted to ask you a little bit about how do you use that? Do you hand them out to everybody who's on the walk? Do you or how do you implement that during a walk?
Yeah. So one of the biggest things for our programs is that we had our scheduled program time, but I was always sure to show up about 20 minutes ahead of time, kind of stand at our site. So for guests who had questions, we had it on public display right next to our binoculars and our field guides. And if visitors got to ask, I went into a good explanation on how to use it on one of the kind of what it was, they kind of based in, kind of gave some examples. Like on the front side, I kind of showed about how to look for a bird in the trees, using kind of the touching point, tactile points. But I also was actually able to give a presentation in the middle of our bird walk when we do our kind of first station with our bird sit. I get to pass around our tool and get people actually kept to practice using the tool while they're on the bird walk itself. So one of the things that actually we realized helped about that was actually being able to model that in the big group with everyone there was something that we really got to enhance our engagement a lot. A lot of people were a little nervous to use it at first. They weren't sure exactly what the material was, but especially kind of kind of normalizing that AAC usage is just both something that they can use in the National Park Service, but just both as people in the world to be nicer to people who actually use AAC devices. So even just that kind of familiarization with that, especially something that we don't that isn't really seen outside of educational spaces.
Okay, thank you. Good
Yeah,
job.
thank you.
Thanks, Aiden. And thanks,
Thank you.
everybody. If you guys can stay on for a few more minutes, we're just gonna do some kudos and I can start. Um, but we can also I'll do my thing and then Kat and Katie can also say a few words if you want. Um, so I made some little cards for you guys. Vince, um, dude, you're so passionate and knowledgeable, and you have such an amazing heart for community and community building, which was super inspiring to see. Um, I know you'll do really great things and spark the love of birds and wildlife in many kids and adults, which is what you talked about so today. And I'm so glad you got to do that. I feel like you were just a DIY machine with your button making and your zines and your coloring pages and all the stuff that you did. So thanks for sharing your gifts. Amanda, I've been super impressed with you and how you really leaned in this summer with your community outreach, coming up with all the programming for Gigi's Playhouse. You just had Amanda just had this program outreach, like pages of what they were going to do, the activities they were going to do, and just super thoughtful. Thanks for how you put yourself out there and kind of embraced being yourself and just being willing to do some scary things. So appreciate you. Aiden, extracurricular mastermind. Uh, as per seen by your slide with your cheesecake, and I know that you did so many cool things this summer. I have no idea how you do all the things that you do. Honestly, I love that you fully embraced this experience and you found ways to connect with community and visitors, um, just with so much enthusiasm and sheer energy. I feel like you have such a future in leadership, honestly, and I'm excited to see what you, not just what you do, but the person you become too. Lily, when I spoke to Kate, your supervisor, from the very beginning of the internship, she just kept telling me how brilliant you are. You have such an eye for what's beautiful and how to translate that beauty you see onto the page. And it was amazing to see you express yourself in all your materials and your flyers and your blog posts. So thanks for sharing your creative gifts with all of us. AG, Swamp Tromper. You're such a unique soul and you have such a bright future ahead of you. I really loved connecting with you because on our one-on-ones, I just knew I would hear about what birds, like cool birds or bugs you'd encounter that week. So that was super fun. Thanks for all of your foundational work at the site. You and Vince really got a lot off the ground and it just was really cool to see. You're like kind of a jack of all trades, honestly. Zach, the Crow Whisperer, potentially a master bird bander in training. Zach, you really look out for people, the people that need to be looked out for. I feel like you are super observant, and also you look out for the birds that maybe people don't notice as much. Really value your transparency, like the way that you see the world, and also really appreciate your humor and how you connected the way you see the world to your programs and events. Crows are really cool, so thanks for highlighting them. And you're really cool too. So it's great to get to know all of you this summer. And I just wanted to share how much I've learned from you guys and how much of an honor it was to work with you all. So thanks. And I'll turn it over to anyone else who wants to say a few
I'll,
words.
I'll go really quick.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. I'm just so incredibly proud of you. It was just such an honor to meet you and connect with you during training. And from interview to now, I've just loved seeing how, like, seeing you shine in each one of your roles. And you've grown so much too. And you had challenges, but you adjusted and overcame. And man, and it's also, this is one of the most supportive groups I've worked with in our whole like internship program that I've been here. I love that. Our group me messaging chat is always popping off, and you're all just giving each other like kudos and lifting each other up and learning from each other and sharing things. So you're all just so, so amazing. We're so happy to have had you. Your sites are so lucky for all the amazing work you've done. You've changed lives, you've made them better. So be really proud of yourselves, and I just can't wait to see what you're gonna do next.
Now, I just want to echo all of that. Stephanie, you just said the thing that is totally on my heart, which is how many people you interacted with over the course of this internship, like, and really created a sense of welcome and belonging and access in a place that they may not have experienced that before, gives me just such a huge amount of joy. And the way that you did it was so clearly investing in each of the sites, working with your supervisors, figuring out how to embed this for visitors for a long time to come. Like, that's badass, you all. You're amazing. And it was so impressive to get to see the work that you were doing. Please know you are 1000% invited to have a home at Birdability anytime you need it, friends. Uh, Blog posts, if you, Lily, are like, oh, I'm missing doing blog posts, please come on over. We'll put up a million of your blog posts with your gorgeous photography. And all of you are um, well, you're honorary birdability captains now, but you are 1000% welcome to become actual birdability captains too, because you embody access and inclusion in the work that you're doing. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I want to pitch in and say I think this program really made a big leap this year. I don't know if you're all aware, but it's a younger internship program that Environment for the Americas has been involved with the National Park Service. But I think it really took off and has gotten its own how do you say that? It's really off and running now. We had a couple of years where we had to figure out some things and really make it work. And I think y'all all made it happen this year. So thank you so much for what you all did. And I want to thank Forrest and Stephanie for a great job organizing this. It was just wonderful. It was Forrest would pop in and tell me something new you'd done, and like I said, show your work, and it was always so fun to see what you're doing and how you're doing it and hearing about the site visits. So to Stephanie and Forrest, just a big thank you for some great leadership and guidance for this program.
Thanks so much, Sue. I just want to also thank
Yeah.
Forrest. He's been amazing, like so like his sensibility and just such a great mentor for this program. And thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks everybody. And I'll echo that too with you, Forrest, when you started sharing those kudos directly to each of these amazing folks. I just felt so like, yes, thank you for articulating how wonderful, each of you all are. Thanks for bringing that heart to us, Forrest. It's hard to know what to share, you guys, and I feel like I've been on the verge of like some happy tears this whole time. I, maybe maybe what I'll say is think back to when we first all met each other in Estes Park in Colorado at Rocky Mountain National Park. Think about all of the excitement, the nerves you had, and how this whole summer was just kind of like a blank page in front of you. You didn't know who you would meet, you didn't know what you would learn, what you would see. Um, go back and high five that previous version of you and high five that version of you that faced whatever anxieties and challenges you had this summer, and know that all of that effort and courage that you had this summer, um, and I am crying. That's all of that work that you put into this program, literally changed people's lives. Showing people a certain type of walking stick that they could use, making people feel included to these spaces. Y'all are just incredible, and just thank yourselves for having the courage to do it. And I hope that inspires you and the rest that you do. I'll be following up over email. I've got some resources for like hiring in the National Park Service. I want to stay in touch. But thank you all. Environment for the Americas, y'all are amazing. Thank you, Kat. Thank you. And thank your National Park Service supervisors, which you already have. But just congratulations, y'all are incredible, and thank you for what you've done for this internship program. You all really did, as Sue said, level it up.
Thank you guys. Thanks for being here, and joining. And yeah, we'll send some farewell goodies to your inbox, so keep a lookout for that. And yeah, I hope you guys have a great rest of the week. And Aiden, I know you got a couple more programs. I hope it goes well, and wrapping goes well. Everyone travel home safe.
Enjoy the last couple days. Bye,
Yeah.
everyone.